Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. Every single day we do SEC Country Live right here on the SEC Country video channels. And today is no different except for one thing. We are really proud to bring you bonus SEC Country Live coverage as we go live to Marietta High School in just a few minutes, which is a powerhouse program in suburban Atlanta, as Ramel Keyton, the four-star wide receiver, will make his college choice today, choosing between Tennessee or Auburn. What a recruiting battle this has been thus far, and what a showdown it's going to be here today as Keyton makes it official.
I think bonus coverage is such a good word when you talk about what we're really expecting today out of the show, and I think it's exciting for a lot of Tennessee fans, a lot of Auburn fans as well. This is a top-flight talent. This is a guy who's a top 200 player in the country, and either school that gets this guy is going to be very lucky to get him on campus.
So just to give you an idea of kind of how it's going to go here, coming up around 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll begin SEC Country Live, the normal show, the way you've come to expect it. And if you've never watched SEC Country Live before, it's a great chance for you to check it out as we talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide, the Georgia Bulldogs, the Florida Gators, some very interesting debates going on as we build towards the 2018 season. We have fun every single day. We'd love to have you check that out. But in about 15 or 20 minutes, we will also, as I said, go to Marietta High School. That's the time frame we're looking at here, where Ramel Keyton, the four-star wide receiver, will make his announcement. And over the course of these few minutes, kind of getting ready for that, we'll learn a little bit more about who Keyton is and talk a little bit about the choice that he's about to make between both Auburn and Tennessee. And obviously, the thing to know about Ramel Keyton right here off the top is, when you talk about four-star wide receiver, you talk about the kind of impact player that both Auburn and Tennessee need for very different reasons. I think Tennessee right now needs players of all stripes. I think Auburn specifically needs help with its wide receiving core. And when you see Keyton there, you see exactly what he brings to the table and why he's gotten the attention of Gus Malzahn and why he's gotten the attention of Jeremy Pruitt.
Yeah, this is a four-star wide receiver prospect, but a very highly ranked four-star prospect. And when you look at what Auburn's program has been built around, they've been built around wide receivers like this, explosive wide receivers, guys who can take the top off the offense, guys Gus Malzahn can use in various roles. When you look at Tennessee, you're right. They need playmakers everywhere. They need guys to come in and be the next Jawan Jennings and these other wide receivers that have really made their mark on Tennessee football. Jeremy Pruitt's trying to get players in there. Well, last time we were on the show, we highlighted Wanya Morris going to Tennessee, Owen Popo going down to Auburn. Who's going to add the next guy to the class?
I want to hear from Ramel Keyton here in just a little bit, but before we get to that, let me dive a little deeper here on the Auburn part of this discussion, because obviously when you think about the Auburn offense for 2018, one of the things you think about is Jarrett Stidham, the quarterback who I think in large measure Auburn will be built around this upcoming season. For 2019 and beyond, it's probably not Jarrett Stidham that's on Keyton's mind here, but apart from that, when you look at the next generation of Auburn, whether it be Malik Willis or Joey Gatewood or Bo Nix, the incoming 2019 quarterback, what is there for Ramel Keyton to like about Auburn?
Yeah, well, I think when you look at Auburn, it's not a question, man, what kind of offense is this going to be, right? This is Gus Malzahn. This is Chip Lindsey. This is the offense that Auburn has been built on, right? They've been built on playmakers like this. So you kind of know what you're getting. You kind of know what you're getting, an offensive system that has proven that it can work in the SEC, that has proven that it can beat the likes of Georgia, that it can beat the likes of Alabama. What you get in Tennessee is a little bit different. You know, you have an offense that, what are you going to be? You know, what kind of quarterback are we going to have? Are we going to have a spread offense? Are we going to have a pro-style offense? What are you going to get out of that offense? At Auburn, you know the answer to that. Gus Malzahn has sold that before. He's gotten a number of elite wide receiver recruits on campus, and it's allowed them to win a lot of games.
Scott Cooley in our Facebook comments section says, hey, what about Ole Miss? At one point in time, Ole Miss was one of the programs thought to be in contention for Ramel Keyton here. It seems like based on the visiting pattern, including being at Auburn really just a few days ago and taking a recent visit to Tennessee, it seems like based on that visiting pattern and some of the online chatter, it is more of an Auburn-Tennessee battle here with Ole Miss probably bringing in the bronze medal part of this conversation. But at one point in time, Ole Miss was in the discussion for Ramel Keyton.
All the way up until a couple of weeks ago. In early May, he names Auburn and Tennessee as kind of his leaders in the clubhouse going into decision day. And you're right, Ole Miss definitely was kind of one of those other teams he kept kind of throwing in at the top of the list saying, boy, you know, I really like Ole Miss too. It seems like in the last 2 weeks, Ole Miss has kind of slid off that trajectory. He's been to Tennessee a couple of times. He's been to Auburn a couple of times, all building up to this decision day.
Jimmy Welch in our Facebook comment section says, spoiler alert, he's going to pick Tennessee here today. Jimmy's also a Tennessee fan and a good friend of us here on SEC Country Live. So maybe Jimmy holding out hope here that the Vols do get some good news. But on the Auburn subject here for a moment, and in just a couple of minutes, we'll actually hear Ramel Keyton talking about what he likes about Auburn. But let me piggyback before we get to Keyton in his own words here on what you were just saying. Obviously, Gus Malzahn's done a lot of good things offensively, but is it fair to say that a lot of that has been at the other positions offensively other than the one that Ramel Keyton plays at? He's developed running backs. He's had Jarrett Stidham, who had a very good year in 2017. I think he'll have a very good year in 2018. He's, he even had, some successful offensive lines here and there. But wide receiver is one of those position groups where maybe there is some skepticism about Malzahn and that never-ending tug-of-war that seems to go on between he and the offensive coordinator, Chip Lindsey.
Well, I think it's so interesting, too. You go back to when Gus Malzahn really kind of stepped into the SEC. It was a different look. You had playmakers all over the field, and that forces these defenses to spread out. We highlighted Anthony Schwartz last week and his 100-meter dash in 10:07 or whatever he ran it in. You got to have that guy on the field. You have to have that speed on the field. That's something these defensive-minded coaches have to prepare for. And that's what Gus Malzahn has built himself around. It's not so much what the numbers are going to be at the wide receiver core. It's the threat they bring to the field. That if they do get the ball in their hands, that something scary can happen for that offense. And Gus Malzahn has been a mastermind at maximizing those threats.
Stanley Redfish King Flott on Facebook says Auburn is stacked at quarterback for years to come. I referenced Malik Willis earlier. Yep. Joey Gatewood has drawn some Cam Newton comparisons in terms of his physical characteristics. You're going to hear Ramel Keyton talk about Bo Nix here in a moment. Obviously a legacy quarterback there too. Auburn. Is it fair to say this program is stacked at quarterback? And is that maybe something that Ramel Keyton's got on his mind here?
There's no denying that Bo Nix might play a part in the decision. If it does come down and he does pick Auburn, I think Bo Nix is a huge part of the decision. You don't have that to really fall back on at Tennessee right now. I know they're really excited about some of the things they have going on in the building. They were excited about signing J.T. Shrout last year. But I really think Ramel Keyton looks at a guy like Bo Nix and says, boy, I'd really love to go play with that guy.
Recently, SEC Country had a chance to catch up with the four-star wide receiver Ramel Keyton from Marietta High School, one of the powerhouse programs right now in the state of Georgia. And Keyton talked about, if it is Auburn that he announces in just a couple of minutes, what are some of the reasons why the Tigers might be his choice? Here is Ramel Keyton with SEC Country.
If I was to choose Auburn, it'd probably be like the bond, like the coaches and like the players have with like my family and stuff, and like when I go down there, like everything close together, and like it's like a easy place to like just be, like you can get around easy and stuff. Like my mom and my granddad and my dad really likes it down there, and like they really try to get closer to your family and like try to get that bond. I think Bo Nix, he really like a good like player, like overall. I think he can be like an NFL caliber like player, like really go to the league first round and like be like a really good player.
Your interesting stuff there from Ramel Keyton talking about Bo Nix, the quarterback just named an Elite 11 finalist here for 2019. Of course, Nick's not the only big commit that the Tigers have right now. When you look at this list, one of the things that you see, Mike Johnson, is tremendous success for Auburn in the state of Georgia. That's been the hallmark of the most successful Auburn teams in 2019. After really being almost shut out to a large measure in 2018, Auburn's back in the state of Georgia. Ja'Kai Clark is from Grayson High School. That's another powerhouse program. Tyler Fromm is the brother of Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm. We just talked about Nix, the high-profile Elite 11 finalist quarterback. Maybe the centerpiece of the entire group, the five-star linebacker Owen Popo. A lot of big-time players from the state of Georgia, to say nothing of safety Jalen Simpson, who's characterized as an athlete and also has a high school teammate, Deshaun Sheffield, that could be on his way to the Plains as well.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And we're talking about a Marietta High School football program that's absolutely loaded with talent. When you look at what they're going to be moving forward, opening up that pipeline, and we just did a little map quest earlier. It's 2 hours from Marietta down to Auburn. I mean, that can be an open pipeline in terms of what Auburn's trying to bring in. When you're having success on the recruiting trail and it's coming straight from Georgia and straight from Alabama, I think that's the blueprint Gus Malzahn wants.
Absolutely. And, the other thing there, obviously apart from the Georgia kids, is Nix, the son of another former Auburn quarterback. And when you have that sort of cachet of being a Elite 11 finalist, especially in a year in 2019 where the people who follow recruiting closely around the country will tell you, maybe this is not the highest year for quarterbacks. Nix stands among the top quarterbacks in the country right now because that status is somewhat open for someone to take. If you're a wide receiver, you are obviously paying attention to that kind of thing.
And that's just something, and we talked about this a lot last year with Justin Fields, didn't we? And Alabama fans talked about it with Tua Tagovailoa before. If you can get a guy on campus early and get him committed to a program, he brings other people around him, specifically wide receivers. And I think you're seeing that effect start to pay off if you're at Auburn. Hey, get this guy committed early. And Bo Nix has come out and said it. I will be a recruiter for this class. Yeah. I think you're seeing some of the similar things at Alabama out of Paul Tyson. I think you're seeing similar things around the SEC. But right now, Tennessee doesn't have that quarterback commit. They just don't. And they've got to go out and be able to find one. I think that just puts him a little bit more at ease if his decision comes down to Auburn.
On Facebook, Jason Cacciatore says he, meaning Ramel Keyton, has been a Vol and he's about to put Jeremy Pruitt 3-0 this recruiting class against Auburn already. We're thinking about the head-to-head winning with Wanya Morris the other day, maybe the centerpiece of that discussion there. And that's a Tennessee fan apparently pretty confident that the Vols are going to be the winner. So let me shift this portion of the conversation. If Ramel Keyton does pick Tennessee, What is the argument in favor of the Vols here?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different things. First of all, you hear when players talk about Auburn, and I've been following this closely in recruiting. When players talk about Auburn recruiting, boy, it's a family atmosphere down there. You know, I feel like it's really comfortable. I feel like all those guys are my brothers in the locker room. You know, it's almost like Gus Malzahn is a father figure, you know, to a lot of these players going down there. When I look at Jeremy Pruitt and his recruiting style, it's almost more of a friend, right? It's almost more of Jeremy Pruitt's your brother. Jeremy Pruitt, you can chop it up with. You can relax with him. You can talk to him. He's a guy you can bounce things off of. We hear those words coming out. Wanya Morris, some of the other guys they've gone on campus. That's what Jeremy Pruitt's known for. So it's a couple of different directions. But we heard Wanya Morris on this program a couple of weeks ago saying, listen, I want to be the building block. I don't want to come in somewhere has already been established. I want to be a building block. And I think if Ramel Keyton chooses Tennessee, that's a lot of the things we're looking at.
By the way, on our YouTube comment section, Tyler Mann mentioning the earlier start here for SEC Country Live today. It's important to note, while we are starting earlier, we're not ending earlier, and we're not really changing the regular format of the show. We have new people watching probably for the first time today because they're curious to find out what Ramel Keyton's going to do. We'll bring that announcement to you live here in just a couple of minutes when he makes it, the four-star wide receiver from Marietta, Georgia, choosing between Tennessee and Auburn. But also at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll roll right along with the regular SEC Country Live the way that we always have, and we'll be curious to find out what Keyton does. I thought you made a good case for why he might choose Tennessee there. The one thing that also sticks up in my mind when you think about the Vols, you're thinking about, you know, a new look, you know, offensive game plan. Tyson Helton coming in and running that.
Yeah.
Obviously, quarterback of the future still up for grabs. We'll talk more about that later on. There are some unknowns for Keyton as he goes to Tennessee.
Yeah, and listen, I think this is exactly the kind of guy that Tyson Helton needs is if his offense is really going to hit its stride. We've talked about pro style, and we've talked about Keller Chris getting into Tennessee, and we've talked about what you're going to do up front and how you want to be nasty in the trenches. But they've also talked about throwing the ball over the top. They've also talked about trying to be an exciting offense, a play-action offense, almost a West Coast style where you can really do different things back over the top of the defense. You've got to find that guy in Ramel Keyton. For the years to come, if you think that offense is going to be sustained at Tennessee, find the kid that can get over the top. And we're talking about a top 200 wide receiver.
In just a moment, I'm going to let you hear from Ramel Keyton once again as he talks about why he might choose Tennessee. Before that, let me get one more comment here from Facebook before we hear from Keyton again. He says, BA, that's me for our new viewers, he's going to drink his blues away tonight as the state of Georgia is losing all these prospects to Auburn and other schools. And if you notice, I do have the Georgia G on my shirt today. For those who watch SEC Country Live every single day, I do talk about Georgia a little bit, and it is kind of funny. We've seen the state of Georgia make a lot of recruiting news lately, but these players, right now anyway, are not going to Georgia.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about it is these are coming from powerhouse programs, right? I think that's what's interesting about it. There's a ton, don't get me wrong, there's a ton of talent in Georgia, right? There's plenty of talent to go around for the University of Georgia to be able to scoop that up. But I think it's interesting to watch teams like Auburn, teams like Tennessee try to start these pipelines from these specific high schools.
I want you to hear from Keyton here about why he might choose Tennessee. This is very interesting. He goes into some very specific descriptions of what he likes about the Vols here, what he likes about Tennessee. I think this is pretty compelling, and if you're a Vols fan, I know you're going to love this. Take a listen to this.
I think probably like the Tennessee because like the fans are way better, like way better. They more involved in everything. Really like when I go up there, you're just like a family feel, and it's like I feel like I belong there and stuff. And then like the coaches, they really want to win and stuff. So like I can feel like in the next couple of years they're gonna be a championship caliber team.
Obviously, different players and different people have different evaluations of certain situations. But how about that scenario from him, Ramel Keyton, describing how much you like Tennessee fans way better than Auburn fans? Now, obviously, Auburn fans might dispute that, but in a way, this is probably music to Jeremy Pruitt's ears, who has tried to reignite the passion of Tennessee fans. The hurt feelings of previous coaching regimes, Pruitt's tried to push that into the past, and with Ramel Keyton, it seems like this is working.
Yeah, I have to imagine that Jeremy Pruitt is absolutely lapping that up, right? I mean, for everything Jeremy Pruitt said after the spring game, and a lot of Tennessee fans took it in a bad way. You know, boy, why is he calling out the fan base? Why don't you do something for a change, and then we'll start showing up to spring games. So I think that's what makes that such an interesting dynamic. Tennessee fans are better. And then you wait for a second and go, wait, did I just hear him right? Tennessee fans are way better, he says in the next statement. So I know Jeremy Pruitt loves that. It allows the Tennessee fans to understand just how big of a mark they're putting on some of these recruits.
Well, it's about the energy. Jeremy Pruitt's obviously got great energy. It may work on Ramel Keyton in a couple of minutes. And by the way, he'll make his announcement live here on this special SEC Country Live broadcast coming up in a couple of moments. It's already worked with other commitments and recruits. As you see right there, the work that Tennessee's been able to do, probably tops on this entire list here, is the guy that recently was upgraded to a 5-star, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, Wanya Morris. also out of the Atlanta area. That's the marquee win for Tennessee thus far in this 2019 recruiting cycle. But the Morris momentum established the other day as part of the Grayson Four may roll right into Ramel Keyton here this afternoon.
It absolutely could, and I think you kind of put that in the right way. Listen, Tennessee needs to kind of get the ball rolling in the right direction, right? We talked about Auburn and getting that Owen Popo decision, how Auburn hops up from like 32nd in the country in the 247 composite team rankings. All of a sudden they're in the teens. You know, all of a sudden they're hopping up 25th. They get another one. All of a sudden they're like 17th. Tennessee's still sitting back there. I really think Jeremy Pruitt, for all the good things he has done on the recruiting trail, and I love the way he's building the team. His top two commits right now are offensive tackle and offensive guard. For all the good things he's been doing, you definitely need to start getting these guys to put the check boxes on Tennessee. It can't all be about visits anymore. Got to start getting guys to commit.
And when we were broadcasting live the day that Wanya Morris did commit to Tennessee, one of the things that stood out to me when we talked to Blake Morgan, who covers Tennessee recruiting for SEC Country. He reminded us that Tennessee was so close to so many elite recruits there for the 2018 recruiting cycle. On the doorstep with Quay Walker, ultimately chose Georgia. On the doorstep with Jacob Copeland, the wide receiver, ultimately chooses Florida. You have these moments in which Tennessee was so close, but maybe the short recruiting cycle for Pruitt, who had to stay around at Alabama to finish off that national championship run. He just didn't have enough time to really plant his flag there in Knoxville. But as Blake Morgan foreshadowed there at the time, for 2019, maybe Tennessee would get more of these wins. For Wanya Morris, that stands as an example of that. And Ramel Keyton, who, by the way, you got to give Butch Jones some of the credit for here, because the Tennessee recruitment of Keyton actually predates Jeremy Pruitt, but taken to another level from an energy standpoint by Pruitt's presence. I mean, this is that longer recruiting cycle that Jeremy Pruitt's going to be able to exploit here for the Vols.
And listen, Jeremy Pruitt took over that job and took the Southeast by storm, handing out scholarship offers, talking to guys. This was not one of them, but in terms of the blueprint that Jeremy Pruitt has had for this job, he handed out offers all over the Southeast. So how soon do we start to see those come to fruition? Listen, you mentioned it. This is Butch Jones, 101. He's had this guy being recruited for a while, but I think 26 offers for Ramel Keyton. Florida was actually the first SEC offer he got. So this is a guy a lot of people want. Now, how many are committable right now? I think you're down to Auburn and Tennessee, because he's told these other staffs that he's just not interested.
That is Mike Johnson, former Alabama All-American. My name is Brandon Adams. You're watching live coverage here of a very special edition of SEC Country Live from our Atlanta studios and just down the road at Marietta High School, which is one of the powerhouse programs in the state of Georgia heading into 2018, and a home of some elite 2019 and 2020 recruits here. One of those is Ramel Keyton, the four-star wide receiver, and in a matter of minutes, Keyton will make his announcement live on our airwaves. So if you're an Auburn fan or a Tennessee fan, you're going to want to tune in. If you have friends who cheer for the Tigers, who like the Vols, let them know we're live here right now talking about this. And of course, at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll roll right in with our regular programming as SEC Country Live talks with the SEC each and every afternoon. If this is your first time checking us out, we appreciate you being with us and would love to have you stick around for a little SEC talk this afternoon, because nobody loves college football more than these two guys right here, and nobody loves this conversation more than the one we're able to have with you each and every day. Before we go live to Marietta for the Keyton announcement, let me bring in one more storyline here. And listen, there is so much in terms of recruiting talk that's about dominoes falling, and it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle that fits together. And one of the things that makes Keyton really intriguing here today is because of the team that he plays for. I mentioned the Blue Devils of Marietta, a powerhouse, a lot of loaded prospects for 2020 on this roster as well. One of them is a guy who is in conversation to be the nation's #1 quarterback for 2020. I'm talking about Harrison Bailey, who shows up on lists of wish lists for all the major programs. And for Tennessee, who has been instrumental in Bailey's recruitment as of late, you got to wonder if Ramel Keyton is a door open for more influence with Tyson Helton and Jeremy Pruitt and this very good-looking quarterback for the class of 2020.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the secret part of this entire deal. When we talked about Bo Nix down at Auburn, you do have Harrison Bailey sitting back there at his own high school. This is a guy who's going to be making his own decision, a year from now or whenever it may be. Does he have an extra look at Tennessee? Is Ramel Keyton talking to him? Is he wondering where Harrison Bailey's going? Could this be a 1 year off package deal? Could you say, man, we really want to play next to each other in college down the road? I think it's definitely interesting to look at Tennessee fans and wonder that. If you're a fan up in Knoxville wondering if this guy's going to head up there, I think it's a good indicator that you have a good shot with Harrison Bailey if Ramel Keyton picks Tennessee today.
Yeah, listen, I mean, let me just be very blunt here for a moment. Quarterbacks change things for the better and for the worse. Will Muschamp, defensive-minded head coach at Florida, never found his quarterback. He eventually gets fired. Kirby Smart
So
at Georgia, defensive-minded head coach. Jake Fromm falls into his lap after Jacob Eason gets hurt. All of a sudden, they're winning the SEC in the college football playoff. You don't think that Jeremy Pruitt, I'm assuming guys he has good relationships with Smart and Will Muschamp, you don't think he's looking at his predecessors here, knowing that this quarterback really matters for me, and Ramel Keyton potentially, who you see there on your screen, as a door into this with Harrison Bailey, this pipeline that Tennessee could establish at Marietta High School. If it can fend off Auburn today, it has a chance to have reverberations for the next couple of recruiting cycles, and it could really be the place where the Jeremy Pruitt administration as Tennessee head coach, it could begin sort of with this moment and at Marietta High School if Pruitt can get some good news here.
It'll pay off in dividends. And we talked about this when the Grayson 4 was making their decision a couple of weeks ago. Wanya Morris chooses Tennessee, and then he goes right into it and says, you know what, I'm starting to recruit. I'm going to be the cornerstone. I'm going to be the face of this program. I'm going to start recruiting. I'm going to do all these things that Jeremy Pruitt wants me to do, and I'm going to open up that pipeline to Grayson High School. I think there's a very real chance that if Ramel Keyton's headed up to Tennessee, we start to see a lot of the same things. We start to see that Marietta pipeline start to open up, dipping back down in Atlanta. We said it when Jeremy Pruitt got the job. Georgia was a state he had to recruit. If you're going to be beating the likes of Georgia and beating the likes of Alabama and Florida year in and year out, you've got to dip down and get some of that upper echelon talent out of this state.
Let me give you a little bit more context here for the kind of program that Marietta High School is. Obviously, guys from the 2018 class like Aziz Ojulari, a four-star pass rusher who chooses Georgia. But for 2020, in addition to Harrison Bailey, you're also talking about the 2020 wide receiver Jermaine Burton, who was in the news from a recruiting standpoint here over the last couple of days because Burton decommits from Miami. That's a huge story. Tennessee's trying to get on Burton's recruitment for 2020 as well. That's going to be a high school teammate here in 2018 for Ramel Keyton here. So that gives you an idea of the kind of talent that Marietta is dealing with right now. Burton leaving IMG to come back to Marietta here, and he'll line up as a receiver opposite Ramel Keyton. How's going to be a defensive coordinator tasked with stopping that group with the nation's #1 quarterback throwing to him?
Boy, you almost need to go down to American Heritage last year and get Patrick Surtain and Tyson
That's
Campbell.
right. That's about what it is.
That's about what you need if you're going to contain that passing attack. I think that's just incredible. And it goes along what we were just talking about trying to develop those pipelines. And we talked about this when Jeremy Pruitt got the job. He's down in Mobile. He's handing out 5 offers at St. Paul, 5 offers at UMS Wright. He's going into Hewitt-Trussville and Birmingham, 5 offers to those guys. He's trying to develop that. I think Jeremy Pruitt knows, listen, this is a guy who was a defensive coordinator 10 years ago at Hoover. He knows how to develop those pipelines. He knows what those high school players and coaches are looking for. He's not that far off of it.
Hannah Michelle in our Facebook comment section says, y'all, he's about to talk, hush. Listen, we're not going to let you miss Ramel Keyton. I promise we'll stop talking when Ramel's ready to go there.
Yeah.
But you know how this goes. I mean, you've watched these ceremonies before. You got to do the cheesing for the photographs. You got to do all that kind of stuff. By the way, looking dapper today in the suit here. I love the lapel jacket, the bow tie, a very formal look here for Ramel Keyton. It's a young man taking this big day seriously right now.
We don't need to shut up yet. Let this guy soak it in. Get this guy on camera. He's got the suit. He's suited and booted, man. He's got that thing. Look, nice new haircut. We're not in any hurry to get this guy on the screen. Let him soak up a little bit. Let him get his shine on today.
Eddie Trout mentioning something kind of interesting, that for Tennessee, this may be a new era in recruiting for Jeremy Pruitt in terms of bringing in players who truly want to be Vols and are truly passionate and excited about the Tennessee program. Obviously, a lot of the online chatter has that being the case, and maybe this is an example of that, where maybe this young man could truly be excited about that.
No, yeah, I definitely think so.
All right, let's go live to Marietta to hear from Ramel Keyton right now.
It's been a long, tough process. So first, I would like to thank God for all the blessings and opportunities that He put in my direction. I would also like to thank my family, friends, and supporters for leading me in the right direction to become better in life. Most importantly, I would like to thank my mom, my #1 supporter, #1 fan. You can hear in the stadiums, Ramel! I really love her for that. I would also like to thank my coaches and teammates for pushing me in practice and off the field, making sure I'm doing good and stuff. I would also like to thank my teachers for pushing me in the classroom, because without this, without education, none of this means anything. I would also like to thank everybody that just surrounds me, and not like my friends, but the supporters around me. I mean, I don't know you personally, but the support I really like it. Thank you. But without further ado, I would like to announce where I'll be continuing my education and career for the next 4 years.
So you hear the Rocky Top playing in the background. You see the unmistakable power tee, the orange and white hat, as Ramel Keyton, the four-star wide receiver from Marietta High School, has become a big addition for Jeremy Pruitt's 2019 class at Tennessee. Mike, what's your initial reaction to this good recruiting news for the Vols here?
This Jeremy Pruitt era is here. It's here officially, and I think this is everything that Tennessee fans could have hoped for. I think that he needed this to step in the right direction. I think all of a sudden you start jumping up from those teams that are 28th ranked, 29th ranked. Start making a move towards the front. Start getting top 20. Start getting top 15. Jeremy Pruitt's headed in that direction. I think obviously Auburn's had a lot of wins on the recruiting trail here recently, but Tennessee needed this one, and they get their guy. This is a great wide receiver.
If you're an SEC fan, stick with us. SEC Country Live coming up in a couple of moments. But if you're a Tennessee fan, stick with us because really in just a matter of a few seconds, we're going to be able to talk to Blake Morgan, who covers Tennessee recruiting for SECCountry.com. Blake's going to give us more of the insight on why it is that Keyton chooses Tennessee, where Jeremy Pruitt and the Vols go from here. So Vols fans, do not turn that dial, as the saying goes. We got more Tennessee recruiting talk here coming up in a couple of moments. And I cannot help but think here, for Jeremy Pruitt, who's never coached a game as a head coach, but already as he moves into the final stages of his first offseason as Tennessee coach, is definitely making good on his reputation of being a big-time black belt A-list recruiter coming into Georgia once again. Proof is in the pudding here for Jeremy Pruitt.
This is David Johnson on the recruiting trail, too, who has proven to kind of be one of those guys I think Jeremy Pruitt trusts in situations like this, dipping down into Georgia and into Marietta. And I think it's a huge deal. This is now the second-ranked prospect on this list of commitments for Tennessee, and I think Jeremy Pruitt's going to continue to build in the right direction.
Let's check in with Blake Morgan, who does a great job covering Tennessee recruiting here for SEC Country on a day when the Vols have gotten some great news with Ramel Keyton, the four-star wide receiver from Marietta, Georgia, choosing Tennessee at a ceremony in his school just a mere couple of seconds ago. Blake, first of all, good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. And would you mind shedding some more light? A lot of Vols fans in our comment section were confident going into this decision that it would be Tennessee. Ultimately, Blake, why is it that Tennessee won out here?
Well, he's talked a lot about wanting to go somewhere where he can make an immediate impact and where he feels like the coaching staff would prepare him to get to the NFL level, right? And, well, Tennessee has a pretty clear path to early playing time. On the outside of the offense at the wide receiver position, Marquez Callaway, Juwan Jennings, they'll be seniors while he comes in as a freshman. So that means sophomore year, it's a pretty clear path to being a starter on the outside at the wide receiver position. And then, getting guys to the NFL. I mean, Tyson Helton has developed a lot of guys as the passing game coordinator while he was at USC. David Johnson, the wide receivers coach, who's really been just a killer on the recruiting trail to this point for the Vols. He's coming on. He just had Anthony Miller from Memphis get drafted over the weekend a few weeks ago in the NFL draft to the Chicago Bears. So, he just felt like this was a comfortable spot. He had a great relationship with the coaches, and, it's just more momentum for the Vols on the recruiting trail.
Blake, we heard a couple of weeks ago Wanya Morris point out the fact that he wanted to be a cornerstone. He wanted to be the face of the signing class for Tennessee this coming year. How much is Jeremy Pruitt selling that to these recruits, and how much do you think they're listening to? Hey, well, you can come here and start something very special.
He's selling it a lot, especially to the top-tier guys like Morris, like Keaton. It's come in and, be a part of something special. You're not just going to be another guy or another, moment along a great dynasty. You're going to come in and you're going to be the face of it. That's what Pruitt comes and tells all these people. What also helps with that is what that means is, hey, you're going to come in, you're going to play early, and you're going to end up, when you leave, playing at a high level in the SEC. And clearly, that's something that's resonating, and it's something that Pruitt has been able to get these guys to believe that he's going to get them there.
And it's not just the players who seem to be buying and believing right now. I've got to imagine, Blake, for Tennessee fans, it's very much the same thing. Pruitt's a high-energy guy. He's dedicated to the recruiting process. And I imagine coming into Georgia and getting these kind of wins, I would imagine for Vols fans, this raises their morale probably more than anything that Tennessee's been able to do in a number of years. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. He just fits the culture of Tennessee just so much better than, the Butch Jones kind of, with the sayings and the little hashtags and stuff like that. I mean, Pruitt is he's just so down to earth. He just connects well with the fans and obviously with these players, which helps. But yeah, the recruiting wins are big. I was listening to the show, and, y'all mentioned that he kind of had the half shot at the fans for not showing up for the orange and white game. I think that rubbed some people the wrong way, but getting stuff like this, generating excitement like this is really big because Pruitt's not going to go out of his way to kind of manufacture enthusiasm. You can compare it to what Chad Morris or Joe Moorhead are doing at Arkansas and Mississippi State, where, they're out in the public all the time. They're hyping it up. They're doing interviews. They're doing everything they can to try to get the fan, support to grow and keep going. Pruitt is going at it from a very Nick Saban approach where, hey, we're on the recruiting trail, and then that's going to lead to wins on the football field, and the people will follow, and they'll be happy. And so that's where it starts. You got to put your money where your mouth is, and Pruitt's certainly done that to this point with another big recruiting win.
Blake, what's the ripple effect here? I mean, this is another big win for Jeremy Pruitt. It's another big win in the state of Georgia. It's another big win from a high-profile program. We talked about Harrison Bailey earlier on the show and really looking towards next year's signing class. What's the ripple effect here for Jeremy Pruitt?
Oh, big. They are really big on the Marietta high school pipeline, right? You got Gilbert, Rashad Torres, and BJ O'Leary that they're really high on. There's also Dawson Ellington's another guy that they've offered and they've had come up to Tennessee as well from Marietta. But as well as the other guys, that they're really hoping that this, Keyton can kind of open up this pipeline with the Marietta prospects, and then also just the Georgia prospects in general. And the fact that, two really good Georgia guys in the class of 2019, and Wanya Morris and Ramel Keyton, are saying, yeah, we'll go up north, we'll go to Tennessee, and we'll start something big. And that's really important. That's something that Jeremy Pruitt has come in and, he thought that they could come in and make waves in Georgia and in Louisiana. We still have not really seen the Louisiana part kind of take off yet, but there's no doubt that Pruitt's proving he can come in and recruit at a high level in Georgia, and that's big for, the future of the program.
But just to follow up on what Mike mentioned, do you think this helps Tennessee with the 2020 quarterback Harrison Bailey right now?
I don't see how it couldn't, right? This is one of Bailey's top targets. Keaton had 59 catches last year. I know Bailey had some injuries and whatnot, but it's his number one guy. Going into this next season, I imagine that they're going to be hooking up for a lot of touchdowns. So, of course, it'll help. And, anytime Bailey comes up to campus, Keyton will probably be with him, and vice versa. Whenever Keaton's coming up, he's probably going to be pushing for him. And, Tennessee has made it pretty clear. They slow played the 2019 quarterback class just because I don't think that they're crazy about anyone in the class. But they're really high on Harrison Bailey. And the fact that you can get his number one wide receiver target is only going to help their ability to get him. But that's going to be a tough one. A lot of people want him, including Alabama. So that's going to be a recruitment that I'm sure we're going to be watching closely over the next year or so.
And Blake Morgan, we'll look forward to reading a lot from you about that over the next year or so there at SEC Country. You do a great job covering Vols recruiting. Thanks for being here with us today on SEC Country Live. We'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Good stuff there from Blake Morgan. I'll also tell Tennessee fans that coming up on your special SEC Country Tennessee video channels, you're going to see an exclusive SEC Country interview with Ramel Keyton on the heels of his Tennessee decision. Check out SEC Country, the Tennessee page there on both Facebook and other outlets. You'll be able to see that from SEC Country there, the exclusive interview SEC Country is able to conduct there with Ramel Keyton, so check that out. For those of you who have joined us here expecting to see SEC Country Live, let's dive into that right now. Of course, my name is Brandon Adams. It's great to have you with us. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. There's a lot to get to here on the heels of Tennessee getting a big recruiting win there with four-star wide receiver Ramel Keyton. Let's start things off with the official portion of SEC Country Live, the way we always do with our First and 10. Item number 1 on our list here from the SEC Country Live First and 10. Some pretty interesting comments being made about Tennessee's third Saturday in October rival, the Alabama Crimson Tide. It comes from Dave Bartu. Dave is a college football analyst known as the College Football Matrix. He's on Bo Bounds radio show out of Mississippi. This has been passed around the internet over the last couple of days a little bit. And one of the things that gets the attention here is the fact that Bartu, an analyst, seems to be expressing kind of a contrarian opinion that maybe Alabama is not as much the team to beat in the SEC West as some people think. Here is Bartu laying out his case for why Alabama could be vulnerable in its own division this year. Take a listen.
I think this year is one of those windows of opportunity for somebody in the West. And maybe it's Mississippi State, maybe it's Mississippi, maybe it's A&M, but there's an opportunity in 2018 that is not within the numbers because of everything that has happened for somebody to rise up and surprise and be that team that a lot of people aren't expecting.
Now, if you're an Alabama fan, you think that raises eyebrows. How about more specifics on the reasons why? New coordinators on both offense and defense. It doesn't sound like Dave Bartu is much of a fan of Mike Locksley or the incoming brand new defensive coordinator Tosh Lapoy. Here is this. Tide fans won't like it.
Realistically, this is his worst career defensive offensive coordinator pairing that he has. Locksley, his career, he's got a D-minus career as an offensive coordinator. I think it's going to be Dan Enos calling the plays in the background. I don't think Locksley's going to get touch anything. That's why Nick brought Enos in. Lapoy is the defensive coordinator. You know, Nick's had two super elite with Smart and Pruitt. I mean, these guys, their defensive numbers are otherworldly, and you're replacing them with Lapoy, who it's kind of questionable if he's ever called defensive plays at all.
What do you make of that, Mike Johnson? What do you make of that? Now, Dave Bartu may not be a guy that a lot of people know about, but it's certainly a pretty provocative opinion.
Yeah, contrarian opinion is kind of a good way to put it. And listen, nobody bleeds more crimson than I do, but I think he's got some valid points. Now, do I think in the end that's going to cause Alabama to lose out on the SEC West? I'm not predicting that, but I've mentioned that before. If you want to poke holes in Alabama this year, it's there to poke. I mean, they lost a ton of talent. 16 guys on NFL rosters right now from last year's football team. You have 2 new coordinators. You have a guy, Michael Locksley, that I've said before on the show. Michael Locksley was hired as a recruiter. Michael Locksley was not hired because he's known as some kind of offensive guru. So you do bring in Dan Enos. I think there's enough people in that locker room or up in that staff room that can put game plans together to be good around Michael Locksley. As far as Tosh Lapoy goes, he has had 2 elite defensive coordinators, but guess what? Jeremy Pruitt was made elite because he was at Alabama. Kirby Smart, I tend to feel the same way about. So I understand it. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and tell you this guy's crazy. I think they have a lot of things to replace, especially in the secondary. They've got some work to do on both sides of the ball, but in the end, this is an extremely talented football team.
On our Facebook comment section, James Perkins says, I think Tosh Lapoy is going to be a good defensive coordinator. And the odds are Nick Saban's going to make a good defensive coordinator hire. But I do think one of the interesting things about the audio that we just heard is we do act like it's just next man up scenario here for Alabama, but that is to a certain extent disrespectful to Jeremy Pruitt, and it's to a certain extent disrespectful to Kirby Smart, who really built this defense, that you could bring in another guy who's much less experienced than Jeremy Pruitt was when he took this job, and certainly less experienced than Kirby Smart was at the end of his run there as Alabama DC, and say, oh, there's no drop-off whatsoever. There may not be a drop-off with Tosh Lapoy, but to act like it's a given, a no-brainer, that you'll just transition to a brand new DC and have the same kind of performance by the Alabama defense, it is at least worth consideration there.
I definitely think it is. And this is, listen, this is a different hiring cycle than probably Alabama fans have seen under Nick Saban, right? This is an Alabama hiring cycle that goes, we got to go get recruiters. I think only one guy you can point at, Craig Kulikowski, is maybe the only guy you brought in because of his coaching.
That's right. That's right.
I think Tosh Lapoy's a great coach. I think Michael Locksley will prove to be a very good offense coordinator. But in terms of why they were hired because they can go recruit. Now, I think Nick Saban's going to have his thumb on Tosh Lapoy this year. I think he's going to have his input on the secondary. I think this is going to be one of those years when Nick Saban really has to dial down the details on the defense in order for them to be successful.
Olbrand says on YouTube, he says Saban's got an impressive record with the coordinators. Look, I hate to go down this road because I'm going to end up getting a black eye for it, but does he? Does he? I mean, let's think about the full breadth of Saban's time in Alabama. How many of those coordinator hires did you leave feeling, boy, that was a really good job by Nick Saban? On the defensive side, he has no experience hiring coordinators. He hired Kirby Smart. He kept Kirby Smart for a long time. Then he hired Jeremy Pruitt. This is only the second time he's replaced a defensive coordinator since he's been in Alabama. So there's not a lot of experience even hiring defensive coordinators, even though he's now been in Alabama for more than a decade. On offense, I mean, you tell me. Did you like Doug Nussmeier? Because Doug Nussmeier was toting himself up to Michigan at some point in time. That may not be a great guy. Was Brian Dable a great hire? Well, he left after 1 year to go back to the NFL. That seems to be a little bit of wasted effort for a guy that had no reputation before Nick Saban hired him. I mean, you tell me about Saban's history of hiring offensive coordinators. Is it as good as you think it should be?
I think it's hard to say it's not. When you point out Doug Nussmeier, that's the only guy I can think of that Nick's hired that hasn't won a national title as an offensive coordinator at Alabama. Now,
but he fired Lane Kiffin for the national championship game. Now, listen, I love Kiffin as the Alabama play caller. I like him better than some Tide fans do.
It was a great hire to me. We're talking about hires. Now, I don't know about him going out the door. I don't know if that decision was right, but we're talking about hires. Lane Kiffin was a good hire. Lane Kiffin set all the offensive records at Alabama. Jim McElwain won a couple of national titles. He ended up being a head coach. Jeremy Pruitt, listen, I understand what you're saying. Jeremy Pruitt was an incredible defensive coordinator for a lot of different reasons, but let's give Nick Saban some credit here. Jeremy Pruitt was hired out of Hoover High School when Nick Saban found him. He identified Jeremy Pruitt, hired him out of Hoover High School, made him into what he is today, and I think Jeremy Pruitt would even admit that. So, we can ask questions about really how many good hires has he had, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Most of them have worked out really well.
Yeah, on this particular offensive coaching staff, the one thing and one of the main reasons why I played the audio from Dave Bartu there is I am 100% in agreement, and I've said this a million times in the show. Dan Enos is the Alabama offensive coordinator.
Right.
And he's a good one. He's a really good one. I thought he was a underrated play caller there at Arkansas. Remember, he leaves the head coaching position at Central Michigan. He didn't get fired. He just chose to leave to go be Arkansas offensive coordinator. And with the displacement of Brett Bielema, he was on the open market. For me, it's one of the underrated coaching hires of this entire offseason. It did not get enough attention, but of all the sort of savvy things that Saban does, getting Dan Enos, that's a big one.
And this is not
Arkansas fans will tell you that.
This is not a quarterback OC, right? This is kind of a different pairing for Alabama fans too, whereas you see that Dan Enos is going to be the quarterback's coach, and Michael Locksley by title is the offensive coordinator. It is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Now, I, for one, look at it, and Bama won the national title last year. Like I said, it's hard to really question Brian Dable. But I'm not sure that Brian Dable was what won that championship, and so I'm open to the idea of Michael Locksley and Dan Enos kind of double teaming this thing.
Dwayne Rourke is a good Arkansas fan in our Facebook comment section on Dan Enos. He says, I agree. Dan was not the problem in Arkansas, and I think most Hogs fans would agree with Dwayne Rourke on that. David Melton taking issue with your statement that Pruitt was made by Saban. David says Jeremy Pruitt was made by Jeremy Pruitt. Saban isn't going to hold anyone's hand through the ranks. I mean, I understand the point you're trying to make, but Pruitt is one of these sort of hard-driving, quick-rising guys. Probably the reason why Saban was attracted to him to begin with, but Pruitt's one of these guys that I don't think he likes having bosses, so he liked to climb his way up the top as quickly as he could.
No, I agree with that. Listen, I've said it a couple times on the show. I count Jeremy Pruitt as a friend. I just think that Jeremy Pruitt would admit that Nick Saban gave him a lot of information. Nick Saban gave him a lot of breaks. Nick Saban taught Jeremy Pruitt a lot of the things along the way. Now, would Jeremy Pruitt have gotten there eventually in himself? Absolutely. I would never make the argument that Jeremy Pruitt wouldn't have gotten to be a head coach in the SEC. But I think the speed with which he was able to do it is absolutely highlighted by the fact that he worked for Nick Saban.
If you're just joining us here in SEC Country Live, a moment ago we were lucky enough to bring you live coverage of Ramel Keyton, the four-star wide receiver who chose Tennessee over Auburn. And speaking of the Vols, they are the subject of item number 2 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And it wasn't that long ago here on our show that we were playing audio from Tennessee Athletic Director Philip Fulmer speaking at a alumni event in Chattanooga, Tennessee, talking about the new stability for the Tennessee athletic program, but preaching a word that Tennessee fans are probably tired of hearing. That word is patience, but Fulmer's still looking for it. Here's Fulmer on that subject at the time.
Well, there's a message generally about the athletic department, you know, that we're stable and we're moving forward and we're working together. And Jeremy is starting in a place that we've never been before, you know, so he's got a long way to go. When I took over, we were kind of here and went to there, you know, and he's, you know, down here somewhere with a long way to go. So patience, I'm preaching patience to some degree.
Patience, I'm preaching patience, he says, talking about where Jeremy Pruitt takes over the program from in comparison to where it was when Philip Fulmer took it over. But as we've said before, there is one thing that may make patience hard for Tennessee fans. It has just been a while since the Vols have been on top of the SEC world, and don't think Tennessee fans don't have their watches out and their calendars out counting just how long it's been. So much so that one writer from The Spun has taken a pretty deep jab here at Tennessee in terms of thinking the Vols are now no longer capable of winning a national championship. Here is what the writer Matt Hladek said via The Spun. This is probably the most controversial entry on our list. I should explain. This was a list of teams that can't win national championships that have won them in the past. Matt goes on to say the Vols have a great fan base and a home field, play in the Premier League and can recruit at a high level. However, they're in the same division as Georgia and Florida and play Alabama every year in a crossover matchup. We wouldn't hold our breath waiting for them to climb to the top of the college football world again. So that's Matt Hladek from The Spun saying that Tennessee can no longer win championships. We can debate that part of it, but isn't it true that the fact that someone on the internet somewhere is saying that makes it a lot harder for Tennessee fans to grant Philip Fulmer his wish of getting patience from them?
Yeah, I think so. And listen, I don't think Tennessee fans in any way buy into it. And he said, listen, this is one of those things on this list that's probably not going to look good to a lot of people because, listen, as much as I think it's an uphill climb for Tennessee, there's been times where they've been absolutely dominant over Alabama. There's been times they've been dominant over Georgia. Go back a little bit farther, there's been times they've been dominant over Florida as well. And so I understand the outlook. You see Saban in Alabama, you see Kirby Smart at Georgia, you think maybe things are moving in the right direction with Dan Mullen, but we just saw it. Jeremy Pruitt is not going to back down from anybody. Jeremy Pruitt's going to go out and get his recruits. He's going to step into Georgia and find recruits. He's going to step into Alabama and find recruits. He's going to get them from Tennessee. Talent's not going to be the issue, I don't think, for Jeremy Pruitt. And so when you talk about those other teams, in the end, I think he's going to be able to match up with those teams. Now, do I think it's going to be in the next year or two? Absolutely not. But give me 3, 4, and 5 years down the road, who's to say that Tennessee's not going to have the option of trying to make it to a national title?
So I'm assuming that you then, based on what you just said there, you don't think Tennessee's disqualified from national
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And honestly, I think it's a ridiculous assessment because we can. There's been teams. And listen, they said that about Alabama when I was there. They said, "Boy, Alabama." It's just not as good a job as it used to be. Why would Nick Saban go there? They're never going to get back to the top. This is a team, this is a fan base that lives in Bear Bryant days. Well, guess what? Alabama's won a lot of national championships since that was set. And I think it's unfair to Tennessee fans. We've had Tennessee fans back on this show a lot. This is another instance. I don't see how you could look 10 years into the future and say, boy, there's just no way Tennessee's ever going to pull it off again. They're going to open up these pipelines. And I understand he's saying the talent in the state of Tennessee, it is what it is. You're going to open up these pipelines and get a talented football team back in Knoxville. I truly believe that.
So I don't think it's true now that Tennessee can't win a national championship, but I think it could become true.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
I think it could become true. Y'all, we heard from some Tennessee fans yesterday on a slightly different subject. We're saying, hey, we've had too much turmoil. We got to just be patient with Jeremy Pruitt. We got to give him 5 years. You can't give a coach that's not winning 5 years. Now, Pruitt may very well win, and Ramel Keyton, the commitment from a moment ago, is an example of some good things that Tennessee's doing here. But Pruitt is under massive pressure to prove himself quickly because 5 years from now, if Mike and I are sitting in these chairs doing SEC Country Live, we're talking about the same kind of seasons for Tennessee that we've been talking about, in the Butch Jones, Derek Dooley, even Lane Kiffin era, frankly, even the end of the Philip Fulmer era. At that point in time, the ship will have sailed for Tennessee. You're going to have a whole generation of people who don't remember T. Martin, and they sure as heck don't remember Peyton Manning, and they sure as heck don't remember General Neyland. All of this is just in the distant past. What the writer said here, even if he said it somewhat tongue-in-cheek, and what Philip Fulmer said the other night, do kind of go together. Tennessee fans have no more patience to give, and the more they're asked to show patience, the more the wheels of the college football world are just spinning right past them, potentially. Now, I'm not telling you it has to happen that way, but if Pruitt doesn't win quickly, the sport could just pass Tennessee completely by.
No, I agree. And we had this conversation when Tennessee was making their coaching hire, didn't we? Pointed at schools like Nebraska. Now, that's before they hired Scott Frost. You had to be careful. You had to be careful that you don't slide down that slope. And I've brought this up about Orgeron a couple of times as well. Now, I don't think LSU is anywhere near that. But I think it's a slippery slope to where you start getting to that point where all of a sudden it becomes harder to recruit, becomes harder to get top tier coaches to come there. You start, and I'm trying to think of a school that, you know, was nationally relevant 50 years ago. Maybe I'm talking about Minnesota. Maybe, you know, I mean, you go back, and some of these schools have done that, where all of a sudden the recruiting bases aren't there, and you don't have the coach in place. And then all of a sudden you become old news. I don't think Tennessee's there yet, but I see what you're saying, that if you look, you know, 10, 20 years down the future, it's hard to climb out of that.
Facebook commenter Daryl Jones says no SEC coach has more than 3 years to prove themselves. I agree with Daryl on that. And to like the sort of SEC outsider, that may sound harsh, but this is big business. We're playing for, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars here, and 3 years is an eternity if you're giving Dan Mullen a chance to build a program at Florida, Kirby Smart to keep things going at Georgia, Nick Saban at Alabama. If you're giving somebody 3 years of a head start against you, you are just getting buried. And you brought up Nebraska. I don't mind telling you, I don't think Nebraska will ever win a national championship again. And in my era growing up as a high school kid, Nebraska was probably the best program in the country. It wasn't that long ago, but things change quickly in college football. Nebraska, based on the current landscape of recruiting and how things work, I don't think they can win national championships anymore.
It's just tough. It's tough when you look at what recruiting is, when you look at social media, when you look at, you know, it used to be recruits. You know, the coaches are calling them on the phone. They don't have social media. They don't have Facebook. There's no rivals. There's no 247 Sports. Those teams can go out and do it. Now there's so much just availability as to what's going on around college football. It's hard to get recruits to go to, you know, what is that, Omaha or wherever.
Lincoln's where Nebraska is, yeah.
It's hard to get recruits to show up there. It's hard to get them to go up to Minnesota and play football. You have to have those recruiting bases in state.
Also on Facebook, Sam David says the Tennessee staff needs to allow Pruitt to establish himself and get his program started. He'll have a window to do that, but let's not act like this leash and rope needs to be 5 or 6 years long. That's just too long. But for Sam, who does have the Tennessee Power T as part of his Facebook profile pic, I think the good news for Vols fans here is Jeremy Pruitt understands the scenario. He knows he needs to win quick, and he knows the games he needs to win to earn the respect of Vols fans and to stay employed and keep this program building. In fact, not too long ago, he laid out very clearly the 3 games that matter for Tennessee more than any other. Here is Pruitt on that subject.
When I took the job, I sat down with Coach Fulmer, and he looked me dead in the eye, and he said, the head coach at Tennessee is going to be judged on 3 games, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. So when you look at that, okay, so where we at compared? That's how hard we need to work.
I mean, listen to that applause there. This is one of those moments that even though I've got the Georgia thing on my shirt here today on this rainy Wednesday in Georgia, this is one of those things where my opinion, I think, aligns with Vols fans pretty completely. I understand the hunger and the passion that Tennessee fans have for wins in those series against Florida more often than has been happening after a long losing streak that was recently broken. Against Georgia, who looks like it may be building a powerhouse. Heaven knows how long it's been since Tennessee's beating Alabama. The applause that Pruitt gets right there is authentic and real. And Pruitt has zero sense of humor. Pruitt's, you know, he is serious as you know what. But because he understands the huge challenge that he's facing, and he understands the very narrow definition of what success looks like.
Yeah, not only that, but he's seen it from the other side of that rivalry, right? He's seen it. He's coached at Georgia. He played at Alabama. He's coached at Alabama. He sees what Tennessee is to the other side of that rivalry. Understands that they have a lot of work to do to dig themselves out of that. And I don't understand. I was going to say I completely understand Tennessee fans when you look at it and say you've got to start winning. Listen, when Nick Saban showed up at Alabama, Tommy Tuberville got 2 years. Tommy Tuberville was out, and that was a great coach for Auburn, right? When you look at what was going on around you, and when you look at what's going on around the schools that you have to play every year, and the schools that you consider teams you have to beat to get to where you want to go, you can't sit there and wait that long. Jeremy Pruitt's got to start making strides.
Always a good day for me when somebody in the comment section is yelling at Mike as opposed to yelling at me. You know, Rick Keene, our buddy, one of our Florida fan commenters, is upset with you for not giving Florida enough credit for its dominance over Tennessee.
Well, obviously, Florida historically has been extremely dominant over Tennessee, but it's like I said to Rick, I don't have it sitting here in front of me, but when I was in high school, I don't want to speak for it, but I want to say 4 out of 5 years, maybe, when I was in middle school and high school, Tennessee was beating Florida pretty handily. Now, I don't think they weren't blowouts. Those were 2 good teams at the time. But let's not say Tennessee's never beaten Florida.
Now, over on YouTube, they always give me a hard time for not reading enough YouTube comments, which I feel like I've done a lot better with lately. Today, though, everybody in this comment section is in a knockdown dragon about something, and for the life of me, I don't even know what they're arguing about. Do you have any idea what they're even arguing about?
There ain't no telling. You guys over there are always going at it. Katie McCarty and Teresa and
Cliff Nelson's right in the middle
chiming
of it.
in.
I don't even know what y'all are even arguing about. All I see is y'all arguing.
MJD.
Yeah. But we'll keep the YouTube comment section going as well. For now, though, let's do item number 3 here on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. And what I think is a pretty interesting piece of video. Could mean nothing, but around here, we always think things at least mean something. Take a look at this video unearthed from social media of Florida freshman quarterback Emory Jones. This comes from him on Twitter. Throwing with Tyree Cleveland here in an indoor facility for Florida. Emory Jones showing off a cannon of an arm. And obviously Tyree, as you know, is the guy that can go get it in the end zone there. It's a nice, pretty route from 2 good-looking athletes. Does this mean something or nothing?
I think it's got to mean nothing. I don't know. I mean, you tell me. What do you make of this video? Because
Michael, our producer's laughing. He thinks it means nothing too. Let me tell you all of you why you're all wrong. He's not running these routes with Kyle Trask.
That's true.
You're not seeing Tyree Cleveland, who is the offensive leader of this Florida team right now. You're not seeing him buddy with Kyle Trask here. He's buddy with Emory Jones. Yeah. I don't think that means that Emory Jones is the starting quarterback, but I believe that means that's the guy that Florida players wish was the starting quarterback.
Yeah, I'm not ready to go there just yet because it's like I said, after graduation's over, you get a little bit of off time. Everybody goes their separate ways, and I mentioned this about Jalen Hurts and Cam Martin, then taking that picture last week. Everybody goes their separate ways. You just want to see these guys on a football field. Now, do I think it's kind of a big deal that Emory Jones is absolutely at the Florida complex right now and doing everything he can possibly do and throwing the ball around and getting to know his wide receivers? I think any work helps. But I'm not going to sit here and fault Kyle Trask if he wanted to go home and visit somebody and Emory Jones was the only guy left on campus and Tyree Cleveland wanted to run routes. That's kind of why I err to the side of it's kind of nothing to me. Now, if we fast forward 3 weeks and everybody's back on campus and in summer classes and you still see Tyree Cleveland with Emory Jones, then I think we're starting to turn a page and I think we're starting to read between the lines.
Old Brandt on YouTube says launching a ball while standing still without pressure means little for a college quarterback. I'll agree the video in itself doesn't say a whole lot, although, and this is just a weird irony, about a year ago at this time, we were on this show talking about one of these videos with Felipe Franks.
Yeah.
And sure, dadgum enough, he actually threw a Hail Mary pass almost exactly like that in an actual Florida game during the season.
These are important times. I try to tell you guys this all the time. These are important times. When because you get a little bit of time off after the spring game, the coaches say, listen, you have a couple of workouts this week, but please go study for finals, do whatever you have to do academically, make sure your grades are up to par. And then you go home. And then there's a 3-week window where you're not obligated to do anything. You can go, you can go back to your high school, you can go work out there. You don't do anything. And so to see these guys, and it's really the new era of college football to where these guys know that I'm going to post this on social media. I'm doing all these things that I have to do to become the player I want to be, and I want everybody to know about it.
Bo Molinari on Facebook's mad at us for talking about a third-string quarterback. But here's the point that I'm trying to bring up. And once again, it's sort of a weird moment where I think that Florida fans will probably join me on this. I'm not telling you the video means all that much, and I'm probably reading too much into this, but coming off a spring in which Emory Jones was really not a threat to even be the number 2 quarterback in Florida, the fact that Tyree Cleveland wants to work with him, wants to pal around with him, the fact that Tyree Cleveland, is sort of seen with him in this sort of social media status here, I think shows me that Cleveland still believes in Emory Jones, which I think, I know this is probably dumb, you can say it's dumb, I just think this video raises the likelihood that Emory Jones is one day the starting quarterback for Florida.
Boy, Bo Molinari is not happy with us in the Facebook comment section. He said, y'all need to name a segment the third string so you can talk about the backups at 4 schools like you like to cover. Listen, I think this is something, though. This is not just a backup. This is a prize recruit. This is a guy that a lot of other schools wanted, and he's at Florida right now, and Florida fans are hoping that he is something. So he might be a backup quarterback now. I don't think this tells us much about what's going to happen in 2018 at all. But another commenter, I think Rick Keene brought it up. Maybe this is the reason Kyle Trask never started for his high school team. Maybe the work ethic right now that you're seeing out of Emory Jones is something that he just doesn't have right now. I think that's digging way too deep, but it's a storyline to watch.
Now, don't get my opinion twisted. I don't know how hard these guys are working.
Right, absolutely.
But the fact that they're working together is a big deal.
Yep.
I don't know if they're breaking a sweat doing what they're doing, but Tyree Cleveland wants to play in the NFL. He wants to train with quarterbacks who have NFL-type throwing arms here. All I'm saying here is you've got the bust forecast for Emory Jones. It just went down a tick in the direction of likely being a bust.
Yeah.
Tyree Cleveland palling around with him means a guy that knows football knows a little something about Emory Jones and sort of likes what he knows.
And listen, the comment that comes into my head is, oh, okay, maybe he's the only guy on campus. Maybe Tyree Cleveland was like, hey, listen, I want to get to the NFL. I want somebody to come throw me some routes. If Emory Jones is the only one on campus. My question is this: if you are locked in a battle right now and you are Felipe Franks, why aren't you on campus? Why aren't you throwing to Tyree Cleveland? Like make yourself available to him. And I'm not going to bury the guy. Listen, I've been in these shoes. I've gone home. I've kicked my feet up for a week or two. It happens. But I do want to see that start to come out of Florida right now. If we're posting videos and Tyree Cleveland saying, hey, look at this ball he's throwing, let's start to see a lot of what we saw last year.
Stephen Early in the Facebook comment section says it's easy for Emory Jones to throw in a window when DeAndre Baker, the Georgia cornerback, isn't on the field, which is a pretty funny comment. Speaking of Georgia, let's make them the subject of item number 4 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And I talked about this morning on Dog Nation Daily, the podcast that I do each and every day. You and I actually got into this as well. You came on the show a little bit today. Andrew Astleford, one of our great reporters here from SEC Country, had some pretty provocative quotes on a number of subjects from SEC Network analyst Greg McElroy. McElroy at one point in time was asked to say, hey, which upset do you think could happen in the SEC this year? And McElroy sees the possibility of Georgia traveling to Missouri in September and losing to the Tigers. Here is what McElroy explained to SEC Country. I would say Georgia at Missouri on September the 22nd. You got to hang a lot of points on them. I think they're good. He's talking about Missouri here. I think they're going to be a handful. Down the stretch in 2017, they were playing really well, so I'm a believer in what they've got going up there, at least for this year. That is Greg McElroy touting the possibility of a Missouri upset over Georgia. While McElroy doesn't say it, it is obvious that Drew Lock, the quarterback, is the main reason why. You're probably not shocked to find out, I don't think this is happening, so I'll cede the floor to you. Yeah. What do you think about Missouri's potential chances of upsetting Georgia?
I think they're extremely slim, first and foremost. I would be lying if I didn't say it. There's not 0% chance, right? I mean, these teams pop up all the time. If you go back to a lot of schools for the last few years, I mean, look at Georgia a couple years ago. They go up there and almost get beat to Missouri a couple years ago to a Missouri team that wasn't very good. I don't think Missouri plays the brand of football that you want to see in terms of beating Georgia this next year that you're going to have. I understand what Greg's saying. It's a September road game going up to Missouri. You got Drew Lock with his first-round arm. You've got DeMaria Crockett. You've got Emmanuel Hall. You've got all these senior and junior-laden team that you think can be very good. But from what I've seen from Missouri the last couple of years, especially under Barry Odom, I don't think that they are tough enough in the trenches to be able to beat Georgia. Not in September, not in October, not in November.
That's an important thing for me. Matt Markham in the Facebook comment section says BA is scared. I think it's a funny comment, but about Missouri for my favorite team, I'm not. And the reason why is what you just said and what Chuck Pearson also says on Facebook, that they can't play big boy ball. And the fact of the matter is that foul stench of Big 12 football is still on Missouri. They've been in the SEC since 2012, but they still feel a little bit like a Big 12 team, and that's not the kind of team that this Georgia bunch is just going to lose to. Who did Georgia lose to in 2017? And I told you this morning. It lost a team that sort of found a way to out Georgia. Georgia does a lot of physical offensive line stuff, tries to be good with a defensive line. Alabama, I mean, I'll be the first to tell you, they were just a little bit better at that than Georgia was in 2017, and they beat Georgia for national championship. In the November game that Georgia lost to Auburn, even though I think for the totality of the season, Auburn wasn't more physical than Georgia, they were that day. In November, in their own stadium, Auburn did push Georgia around a bit. The only way Georgia's going to lose is to find somebody who's sort of a bigger bully than Georgia is. Georgia plays kind of a bully brand of football, and if somebody bullies them a little bit more, then Georgia stands to lose. But this, ultra finesse version of two-hand touch, 7-on-7 stuff that Missouri plays, that's not beating a team like Georgia, nor would it beat in Alabama. You saw Auburn a year ago go to Missouri and just, drag them all over the stadium. Those kind of elite SEC teams are not getting beat by this Big 12 finesse.
Well, let me flip this on you, too, and let me kick this right back at you and ask you a question. Now, if we're talking about possible Georgia upsets, and we're talking about road games, and we're talking about what it takes, the toughness in the trenches, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much are you worried about the game down in Baton Rouge? I think that when we're talking about big boy football, that's something LSU has historically been able to do. Now, do they have the running backs to do it this year? What's the quarterback position going to hold? But big boy football, does that game in Baton Rouge worry you?
So I do Dog Nation Daily every single day. I will tell you that I'm going to spend an entire week drilling down heavily on that LSU defense. I don't know that the LSU offense with the offensive line, I don't know what the offense does to scare Georgia, but you better believe with Braden Fajoko manning the middle, with Devin White at linebacker, with Alexander moving over as a transfer in the secondary, that's a real SEC defense. To say nothing of the fact that Dave Aranda is a terrific defensive coordinator. I don't know who wins that game yet, but in terms of a Georgia fan, to use the commenter's word a moment ago, being scared, I'm going to be a lot more scared of the LSU defense than I am the Missouri offense. I can promise you. If I'm a fan going on the road to take on a real defense,
I agree.
Scares me a whole lot more than, some glorified 7-on-7 offense.
No, that's exactly what I was kind of alluding to. Listen, I think Greg can look and say, okay, early in the season. Now, listen, South Carolina's earlier in the season. I think that becomes a scary game. They have a quarterback. I think when you're talking about teams that play in the trenches, I think you talk about going on the road to LSU, to Baton Rouge. It would be a marquee matchup for SEC games. I just look at it and say, boy, if we're on upset alert, Missouri's just not the one for me.
And to be fair to Greg McElroy, it's not like he called us to tell us this. We called him and asked him to give us an answer, and he gave one. And it's not an invalid opinion. I mean, it's not, an unreasonable point to argue. I just happen not to agree. But for what it's worth, last year when Georgia was getting ready to play Missouri, Kirby Smart, looking at that Missouri offense, he had great respect for it, and I'm sure he'll feel the same way going into 2018. Here's Kirby from then as a reminder.
Good quarterback that's accurate, that knows where to throw the ball, can attack a defense, and that's certainly what Mizzou has. I think this kid's got as strong as arms as anybody in the league. He's got two really outstanding wideouts, not to mention some big tight ends, and they do a great job the RPO game. They're very hard to defend last year, and they're very hard to defend this year. We got to have a good plan, and we got to play well.
It's also worth pointing out that Jamon Moore, the receiver that Kirby Smart alludes to there, is not on the program anymore. Josh Heupel, the offensive coordinator, is now head coach at UCF. Goofball Derek Dooley is in his place here. Honestly, I'm not even sure that Missouri has beaten anybody of consequence this season.
Yeah, Cliff Nelson says in the YouTube comment section, Missouri's offense is now led by Derek Dooley. No one is scared of that. Of that, I guess you could say. And I think that's true. And listen, I'm not ready to just completely throw Derek Dooley out the window. I think he's got a lot of offensive pedigree. I think he's seen how to run good offenses, but he's never done it. Then all of a sudden you throw Drew Lock into that, who's known as a gunslinger, and you're going to go to a little bit more conservative style under Derek Dooley. I don't know that the mesh is going to be there. I'm going to have to see that offensive line start to take over some games with that running game.
Billie Jean 2012 on YouTube says, and this is in all caps, so this is a very serious point, Drew Lock is NFL ready. If he played for Alabama or Georgia, he would start. I mean, you can speak for your team, I'll speak for mine. I'm not trading Jake Fromm for Drew Lock.
Absolutely. Y'all know my personality. Listen, we've sat here and argued over interception ratios and touchdown ratios. I don't want a gunslinger. I think the two is as gunslinger as I could possibly want. I want somebody that's ready to tuck the ball, take a sack, get what they can, get down. Touchdowns or checkdowns is me. I don't want any interceptions being thrown in there for my offense.
Yeah, so, I mean, listen, I understand why Drew Lock's got the buzz, but I'm just not into it. I may be wrong. Y'all may be laughing.
Give me Jarrett Stidham all day. Now, if you want to have the Jarrett Stidham conversation, we can have a conversation.
And we're actually going to do some of that later on this week on SEC Country Live here, but I may be laughed at for my dismissal of Missouri and Drew Lock right now. But for now, let me be very clear. I am totally and completely dismissing Missouri.
Yeah, no, I'm right behind you. I understand what they did down the stretch, and everybody's going to talk about, the winning streak and all that. Look at the teams they played, man. It wasn't – I just think that Barry Odom is on an extremely, extremely hot seat right now.
Let us do item number 5 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. It would not be an episode of our program if we didn't talk a lot about the graduate transfer quarterback Joe Burrow. And it certainly seems like we better talk about him now because he's not going to be relevant for our audience much longer based on some of the news here. Let me start with a reporter out of Nebraska who recently tweeted that on the heels of the visit to LSU, and I guess some thought that maybe LSU and Cincinnati were the only places that Burrow was going to go, he at the last minute decided to go somewhere else. Here is Sean Callahan letting us know that Burrow visits North Carolina. The report here is Ohio State graduate transfer quarterback Joe Burrow visits Cincinnati LSU. We've talked about that. But his third and final visit this week is going to be to North Carolina. I would expect an announcement by possibly the end of this week from Burrow. That was tweeted yesterday. That means by the end of the week we may know something here. I'm going to show you what Sam Spiegelman said about this in just a moment. Let me follow up on this here quickly. And I don't really even care. If he doesn't go to LSU, we'll probably never even think about him again. But North Carolina just took a transfer quarterback. And it was a big-time prospect, Brandon Harris from LSU, and the best I can tell, they did nothing with him.
Right.
What is Burrow thinking about going to North Carolina?
I wish I knew. I mean, we sat here and shout out to Tyler Mann because he actually tweeted this at me today on Twitter, and it was an article, and it talked about how, hey, listen, maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe the lure of playing in the SEC that we heard Keller Chris talk about, that we've heard a number of other, grad transfer options talk about, maybe it's just not there for Joe Burrow. Maybe playing like an LSU and becoming the savior for that program, maybe it just doesn't jump out at him. I know that we're gonna talk about these articles and talk about the words that Joe Burrow's used. If you're looking at Cincinnati and you're looking at UNC and you're not picking LSU, guess what? In my book, you're just not cut out to play there anyway.
Yeah, that is such a great point. And by the way, I'll give Cliff Nelson credit, who in our YouTube comment section has been unwavering on this. Cliff hasn't wanted him from the word go.
Nope.
And maybe Cliff, as an LSU fan who's close to this situation, had his intuition sort of perked up with the fact that maybe he just doesn't want it bad enough in this league. Tyler Mann, also in the YouTube comment section, says, from what I read earlier today, it sounds like Cincinnati has the edge over LSU for Burrow anyway. In fact, let me show you Sam Spiegelman, who is a great source for stuff like this, writing for SEC Country on this very subject. It sounds like Sam's kind of leading in the same direction. And this is a very interesting quote here and a very interesting word to use. Sam Spiegelman writes that a source that spoke with Burrow used the term, quote, nervous to describe the thought of playing in Baton Rouge. That is not what you want to hear.
That is not
Hence, Sam Spiegelman writes, that's why I've emphasized Cincinnati as the favorite in this race. Burrow doesn't have too many relationships with the current Tiger players, so it would not only be a major football transition, but a social one as well. Meanwhile, he has several connections at Cincinnati, including some staff members and players in the players on the team. That's Sam Spiegelman, our great colleague from SEC Country. I don't have to tell you this because you already know it, but I'm going to say it out loud anyway. If you think it's hard playing at LSU, it's even harder than you think. Like, the only people who work at LSU are either the people too brave or too dumb to know how hard it really is. If you're already nervous about it before you even start, then you're going to get eaten alive by the time you get there.
Yeah, and obviously, this comes from a source or somebody that might know Joe Burrow, and the word nervous, you don't know really what that was used as a part of, but the fact that it's even being talked about. It goes back to a conversation we had, I don't know if it was early this week or last week, about Dan Mullen not wanting to play the non-conference games. Well, we got our hands full with Florida State. We're not really. That's kind of what I feel like about Joe Burrow. Boy, I was already in this quarterback competition at Ohio State. I'd be nervous to go there and compete with the guys at LSU. Why don't I just go to Cincinnati where I know I'm going to be the starter? You know what I mean? It's just, if true, and he actually made those comments about being nervous and he's not going to select LSU because of that, I think it's a lot of a cop-out, and I don't think LSU fans will miss him very much.
Tyler Mann on YouTube also says that Spiegelman, who we just quoted from SEC Country, goes on to say in that same story that Orgeron could also be using this to motivate his current quarterbacks in the roster. I said the same thing yesterday. Tyler, you may be right about that. Sam Spiegelman may be right about that. I personally don't think that's going to work because you either alienate guys who are either already on their way out, or you allow them to sort of take a sigh of relief of, I thought I was going to have even more competition, now I have less. Yeah. Things are going to get a little easier. As a motivational ploy, for me personally, I just don't think it works. Now, maybe LSU's better without him, that may be very well the case, but as a motivational ploy, for me, this is unlikely to work.
No, absolutely. I mean, look at Justin.
Absolutely, you agree with me?
Yeah, I agree with you. I look at Justin McMillan, and if I'm not mistaken, and LSU fans will definitely correct me if I'm wrong on this, he's already graduated. This is a guy that's going to graduate this spring, so you talking about, are we kicking up the competition, or are we telling somebody else to leave? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, I think there's two different angles to look at that. And I wouldn't consider it a done deal that he's not going to head elsewhere just because I feel like he thinks he's been slapped in the face over this whole saga.
Cliff Nelson, our final comment on this, also from YouTube, says Death Valley on a Saturday night is not for the faint of heart. And that's true. There's so true. No room for nervous. You can't be, if you're the kind of person that's prone to nervousness, you're not going to be happy at LSU.
Listen, man, I've been there. I'm telling you, I've blocked Glenn Dorsey. I've blocked Al Woods. Tyson Jackson, it's not for the faint of heart at all.
Let us do item number 6 here in our SEC Country Live, first and 10 list. And Nick Saban, speaking to USA Today, was asked to comment on the UCF national championship claims. And I believe most Alabama fans are going to like what he says. And in a roundabout way, maybe he's kind of putting some of this stuff to bed. I wonder if you hear less about this from UCF now on the heels of what Saban says here and what Scott Frost has said, sort of distancing himself from the entire discussion. Here is Saban, as quoted by USA Today, on UCF's claim. He says, I guess anybody has the prerogative to claim anything, but self-proclaim is not the same as actually earning it. There's probably a significant number of people who don't respect people who make self-proclaimed sort of accolades for themselves. I have said all along that UCF has sort of won this battle with Alabama because they've gotten Alabama to talk about it. But something about the way that Saban says that there feels like it feels like an ender, right?
Yeah.
It sort of feels like
Like a
he
mic
has
drop.
the last word on a mic drop. It sort of feels like he has the last word on this subject. I'm assuming you agree.
No, I agree, and this is just such a Nick Saban style burn, isn't it? Like he doesn't say, "Boy, I think it's dumb that they do this." He says, "Well, there's probably a significant number of people that think if you've crowned yourself that you probably lose a little bit of respect for those people." It's just such a Nick Saban way around it, and he's so good with his words. And I agree with you. It does feel like the final word in the conversation because we've heard Scott Frost. I think the conversation was on its last leg, and then Nick Saban, I feel like, kind of buries it here.
Well, I don't want to go too deep into the weeds on this, but there's this thing in politics when you're asked a tough question, the PR trained person knows not to repeat the question. Let me show you. Can I see the quote from Nick Saban one more time? Do you mind showing it to me? Because he's asked, "Hey, what do you think about UCF being the national champion?" But notice he never mentions UCF, and he never mentions the idea of somebody other than Alabama winning the national championship. If you look at this quote here, it's actually from a PR standpoint pretty damning for UCF. He talks about self-proclaimed. He talks about, lack of respect, and he doesn't give any credence to UCF whatsoever. I think he may have just shut this whole thing down.
Yeah, he doesn't even say UCF, or
That's right. He doesn't grant the premise of the question at all.
Yeah, he basically brushes it off as, "Why are you coming at me with this?" And there's so many different interesting angles to it, and I'm kind of with you. I think the fact that we've given so much credence to it and have talked about it, I think is exactly what UCF wanted. By the way, not to go off topic here, but Alabama scheduling a home-and-home with Texas.
We need to mention that. We have not brought that up today.
And the game that got canceled for Texas was a UCF game in Austin, Texas. And we talked about the schedules yesterday. I could not be more excited. It's not one of those that's 10 years away like Notre Dame. This is coming up in a couple of years for Alabama. I'm so excited about it.
That's a really good point. The Texas series is home-and-home is going to be great for the Crimson Tide. Let me read, though, quick sort of counter point to all of this comes from Jamie Blanton. On this Alabama-UCF discussion, Jamie says, "One side proclaims to be national champion, but the other was handed a berth in the playoff. Earned the championship," he uses in quotation marks, "mind blown here." It is not an insignificant retort to this to say that while UCF proclaims itself national champion, Alabama was proclaimed by somebody else for sure, but still proclaimed, not winning their way in, just sort of granted access to the playoff. There is at least some reasonable retort to that there.
No, and I think that we've seen this from the committee. We saw it from the BCS that you're not going to crush teams for the schedules they're playing, right? And if you're playing the SEC West, it's known as being one of the toughest schedules. If you go out and play Florida State, it's known as being part of the toughest schedules. I think the committee wanted to accept those kind of things. Hey, you play tougher teams, we're going to look into it that way. You didn't want to really downgrade Alabama because they didn't play in the SEC East as opposed to the SEC West. Georgia had the same loss that Alabama did. They end up getting retribution in the SEC championship game. So I understand it. But Alabama, I think, when you talk about what they did against Clemson, when you talk about what they did against Georgia, I don't think there's any question in anybody's mind, at least not mine, that they won the national title fairly.
Bo Molinari, a great commenter in our Facebook comment section, says, "I was a PR major and Saban stay was just about perfect." That's good stuff there from Bo on that. Let me move on to item number 7 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And Pete Futak, who I don't know if you know personally, but he's a good analyst. He does college football news and some things like that. He was on the Paul Feinbaum show the other day, and he said something that, I don't know, kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit. Maybe it doesn't raise yours. It sounds like Futak thinks that the road back for Florida may not be that long and may not be all that treacherous. He says on Feinbaum's show it might not take much for Florida to get back to the SEC championship game again. Once again, Pete Futak is a pretty good college football analyst there. One of the things he cites is the fact that the Gators were in the SEC championship game not all that long ago when they were there 2 years in a row. And he talks about some of the things that Florida does have. Now, I know people think I'm biased when I say this, but it's as authentic opinion as I know how to express. I do think Florida's a long way away right now. Who's right here, Futak or me?
Well, I've gone on record on the show as saying that I agree with Futak. I just don't – I know that the depth concerns are there because we've had recruiting problems in the last couple of years under Jim McElwain. But I think that what he's alluding to is the same things I've been saying here on the show is that at the top of it, at the very thin top, when you talk about the first-string guys, there's a lot of talent still at Florida. The offensive line needs a little kick in the butt. I think they'll get that out of the strength and conditioning program. They've got the secondary to be able to do this. They've got a very good linebacking core. They've got pass rushers. They've got wide receivers that can get it done. They've got running backs. They have pieces in place that if all things fall right this year, they're not that far off. Now, does Dan Mullen absolutely need to get back to the recruiting trail and start replenishing those things? Absolutely. I think if you don't see a good recruiting class out of Dan Mullen this year, things start to look bleak for the next couple of years. But on the top, on the surface, I don't think they're that far away, and I've said that multiple times.
Quinn Flanders says if we find a quarterback, we only lose 1 or 2 games this season top. Matt Markham says all Florida has been missing is accountability. There's obviously been a lot of reporting lately about the lack of accountability at the end of the Jim McElwain era. But the one thing I keep coming back to is, and I don't know if I'm right about this, I don't know the true story here, but isn't it just a little bit convenient to sort of place every problem that existed with the Florida program at the feet of Jim McElwain's lack of accountability and not making sure guys were going to the weight room? Isn't it a little bit too easy to sort of sweep all that under the rug and say, that was McElwain's issue and now McElwain's gone?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I do think a lot of things are rooted in that because I saw it with my own eyes watching Florida play last year. Guys like C.C. Jefferson were very big recruits. Guys like Martez Ivey, very big recruits. Felipe Franks, a lot of people wanted Felipe Franks. If the accountability is not there, these programs can slip quickly. And I think that's what you saw at Florida. I think you saw a lot of top-level talent that could get it done talent-wise in the first couple of years they go to the SEC Championship game. I think once you start to lose that accountability, once you start getting distance from the good strength program they had under Will Muschamp, then all of a sudden you start to look around and say, boy, do I have to go to the weight room today? Do I have to do these things? I think that's a slippery slope.
Neil Lammers on Facebook says the Gators have talent, whether you want to admit it or not, BA, and we will see that this fall. And a lot of Florida fans are going to have a lot of bragging rights against me if that does indeed turn out to be the case. Let me do item number 8. Now, SEC Country Live, our first and 10 list, a follow-up on what we talked about yesterday. We mostly sort of talked about this from a joking standpoint. Christian Kirk, the former Texas A&M wide receiver and outstanding kick returner, who charges surfaced for him stemming back from the Waste Management Phoenix Open, which is the sort of famous for its debauchery golf tournament that takes place Super Bowl weekend every year in Phoenix. But now TMZ adds a potential detail to this that's, I guess, troubling. TMZ says NFL rookie Christian Kirk was showing signs of cocaine use when he was arrested, according to people there on the scene and the police report there. That report coming from TMZ.com. How does that change the nature of this situation for you?
For me, it changes it to where I'm a little bit more shocked that the Cardinals were evidently willing to go there. I mean, the Cardinals said they knew all about the situation before they drafted Christian Kirk, and they just thought that much of his talent, and he's still slotted as a high draft pick. That's troubling for me because, listen, marijuana use, I don't think it's a good thing. I think you can point a lot of different directions. But cocaine use is another level, and I think you start really have to worry about people have problems. We've talked about the Johnny Manziels of the world. We've talked about other players coming from college football to pros. Because listen, you get to the pros, and guess what? All of a sudden you're a millionaire overnight. All of a sudden you have money to do these white-collar drugs, if you want to call them that. And I think that's scary for Christian Kirk. I think I would be dismissing it in the wrong way if I said it's not a big deal. I think it's an extremely big deal, and I hope it's something that he gets reeled in.
I guess the thing I would point out here is that while police reports are something to take very seriously, they are also of the opinion of the officer who wrote it up, and maybe there's a chance that was his evaluation of the scene, but there's no test to back that up right now.
Yeah, there's no test to back that up. I think he said that he was grinding his teeth and kind of staring straight ahead, which are, some of the things you look for in any kind of drug use. Doesn't mean it was definitely cocaine. It could have been a lot of different things, but it's troubling to me, and I hope that Christian Kirk is able to kind of look into some of these things and get them under control.
I hope the best for him. I hope this allegation is not true, and I hope that he goes on to have a great NFL career. I want to thank Kerry Segura in our comment section, who speaks to another Facebook commenter, Landon Barnhill, who had asked about what Ramel Keyton, the 4-star wide receiver, had done. We actually came on the air early today for a very special SEC Country Live broadcast, and 4-star wide receiver Ramel Keyton did choose Tennessee over Auburn here on the air a moment ago. It's kind of cool to be able to bring that story to you here live today, and a big pickup for Tennessee there.
No, it's hard to argue against that. I think when you look at what Jeremy Pruitt's blueprint has been, going out and getting recruits and getting top-flight recruits at positions like wide receiver has got to be the things that Jeremy Pruitt's looking at. And this is a team that, like we said, got Wanya Morris, but other than that, 31st ranked class. I think there's maybe 8 SEC schools in the top 17, 18. He was not one of those, and I think this is a step in the right direction. It's kind of a sigh of release, I think, for Tennessee fans.
All right, let's do item number 9 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And Brandon Walker on his podcast covering the Mississippi State Bulldogs on SEC Country every single day touched on a subject the other day that's very important for State fans right now, and for the moment at least, a good bit of uncertainty. As a way of setting this up, let me just let you hear Brandon Walker explaining why the Bulldogs could potentially this fall be without a player they were hoping to count on. Here's Brandon Walker to explain.
Stephen Guidry is a wide receiver originally from Louisiana, a guy that Mississippi State signed, a 4-star out of Hines Community College. He is somebody that State was going to lean on heavily. He is at a position of need. Last year, Nick Fitzgerald, the quarterback in his junior season, he was kind of hurt by the fact that his receivers just didn't play very well. So now, suddenly on Twitter yesterday, the guy that you think is going to be your number one receiver this year tweets this: "I've decided to sit this semester out and come back for the spring." Well, isn't that a giant punch in the throat?
So that's Brandon Walker explaining the potential negative reaction that Mississippi State fans would have if it indeed is true that Stephen Guidry ultimately does not play for the Bulldogs this fall and delays enrollment to the spring. And Walker went on to explain just how confusing this situation is, why a guy that could be a big factor would choose not to be a part of all this at Mississippi State. Here's more from Brandon.
This is weird. It's just a weird situation. It's a guy that is going to be given the keys to the kingdom at wide receiver. I mean, he's going to be the number one wide receiver the day he sets foot on campus. And there's drama. And from what? I haven't seen anything Mississippi State's done wrong. This seems to be a pattern with Stephen Guidry. It does. Remember last year, he committed to Mississippi State, then he committed to LSU, then he signed with LSU, and then he went back to JUCO. It was just a big – I mean, this guy's been in the recruiting news for 2 years. And then he signs with Mississippi State in December. He shows up in January. He doesn't practice very much. You hear, is he hurt? Is he not practicing? Does he not want to be there? And it goes on and on and on for 3 months. We don't see him in the spring game. Now, all of a sudden, here we are in May, and he's tweeting that he's going to sit out the semester. No one player, no matter the position, is bigger than the team. No one player is worth this much drama. I hope Stephen Guidry shows up in August ready to play football. But if he doesn't, Joe Moorhead has his first big test.
So I love how Walker explains at the end a potential big test for Joe Moorhead. I'm guessing that you and I are on different sides of this because you obviously played the sport at the highest level, SEC and the NFL. I played in high school football, or not football. I did not play football. I played high school sports like basketball. I've certainly seen players who were not worth the drama, right? I've seen players who were locker room cancers, things along those lines. I understand all of that, but if I'm Mississippi State and I need a receiver and this is my best guy, I'm going to tolerate a little drama if he really is my best receiver. It's not pleasant, it's not pretty, it's not fun, but if he's my best receiver, I probably have to tolerate a little drama here and hope he comes back this fall and whatever he's tweeting is just a bunch of nonsense over a girl.
I almost always side on the players when it comes to things like this. Boy, whatever he's got to do to get it ironed out. You know, he might have a problem at home. I just don't feel that way about this. Mississippi State signed an incredible class of wide receivers last year, and only one of them is not going to be on the roster this fall. I mean, they signed, four-star wide receivers?
I think that's actually not true. I think one of them is going to junior college. But I mean, not to just jump on your point, but I think
what I'm saying is
which makes Guidry more important, I think.
What I'm saying is this. Mississippi State has a loaded roster this year. The one thing they're really missing is an explosive wide receiver core. If this guy's going to play hokey pokey with your program, I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out, you don't need him. I mean, move on from him. I promise you right now, you are better off in the long run. If Stephen Guidry is that non-committal to being part of this team, then Joe Moorhead in his first year as head coach needs to send a message to all these recruits that he has coming in, all the people he's trying to sign this next class, we're not going to play that game with you.
Yeah, but here's what I don't like about coaches sometimes. This send a message to the problem player is really a way of sort of sabotaging the season from the get-go, and you end up sandbagging situations.
I agree with that.
So when you start losing games, he can say, hey, what do you want from me? I had to kick Stephen Guidry off the team, if that is indeed what happens here. These coaches that sort of run off the bad apples when they first come in, I know that looks like a way of getting tough and being all about discipline. It's really a way of sort of lowering expectations, so at the end of the season, they either have an excuse when things don't go well, or it makes them seem even better if they do win some games. It's all a psychological ploy on the part of these coaches.
I agree with you, and Lord knows I've told the story on here a million times where Nick Saban comes in the locker room in 2007 and says, boy, when I can get rid of you, I will get rid of you. That's when I can get rid of you. It was like Nick Saban didn't want to sabotage it, right? He was like, well, I'm going to keep you for now because you're all I've got. But when I can't get rid of you, I get rid of you. So there is a little bit of that.
Shane Higgins on Facebook also says Stephen Guidry's like Duke Williams 2.0. The problem is Auburn can get away without Duke Williams and sort of be fine. Mississippi State needs Stephen Guidry.
Yeah, I mean, they need him this year. And I think that's what makes it scary, though. I don't think you can let a player and a first-year head coach, the first time he's ever been a head coach, I don't think you can let him hold you hostage. I really don't think you can. I think that Joe Moorhead would be right to send a message right here. wins and losses and year number one aside, I think that looking at it right now, I would like to see him send a message.
All right, let us do item number 10 here, and this is pretty fun. On a normal show, I would like to get to this actually a little sooner than we were able to today, but Steve Ensminger has responded back to Greg McElroy, who at some point in time, and I should know this, I don't know where the McElroy comment originated from. Do you know?
No, I don't know.
So McElroy at some point in time was like, hey, I just hope LSU gets a quarterback in my lifetime.
I think it was on his radio show, the Sirius XM kind of thing right there, but I don't know for sure.
Okay, so McElroy at some point in time said that, and I think he's probably joking, being somewhat snarky. I don't think he's meaning this as a way of burying LSU, but Steve Ensminger, the LSU offensive coordinator, and the staff of social media editors there for LSU, uses this as a chance to sort of retort and rebuff the statement by McElroy. Ensminger tweets out, competition breeds excellence. Come compete to be the best right here at LSU. And he gives us an august body of quarterbacks, including Josh Booty, Rohan Davey, Matt Mock, Jamarcus Russell, Matt Flynn, Zach Mettenberger, and the latest addition to that list, Danny Etling. Does Ensminger get the checkmate here over McElroy by pointing at these quarterbacks as being the example of LSU success in developing quarterbacks and putting guys in the NFL?
I have to think in a way he does. Now, I think it's
Come on, are you serious?
Yeah. No, I know, absolutely. That's impressive.
Josh Booty was a baseball player.
That is an impressive list.
I don't know where they found that picture of
Jamarcus Russell was the number one overall prospect.
I got no
number one draft.
I got no beef with Russell.
Now, I just think when you look at the last 20 years, it says LSU is the only SEC school to have 7 quarterbacks drafted in the last 20 years. I don't see how that's not a credit to LSU in the quarterback position. Now, I think LSU fans will be the first one to tell you.
Guys today?
I think LSU
Matt
fans.
Mock's probably doing a radio show.
Matt Flynn had a great career. Matt Flynn had a great.
Doing what?
It was a quarterback in the NFL for what? I don't know, 10 years? That's a good career.
Michael, have you ever seen an NFL game that Matt Flynn played in?
Oh, y'all are lying to yourself.
Maybe the holder.
Maybe it was just because I watched it out there. I watched him do some good things, but
now all of a sudden I lived it. Yeah.
No. I'm just saying
this is his way of saying
Matt Flynn,
y'all watched it on TV. I lived it.
Matt Flynn had to win a game as the backup quarterback and did it one year so the Falcons go to the playoffs. I was like, well,
what team was he playing?
He was playing for the Packers, I want to say. I think he was playing for the Packers at the time and had to play like the Lions in the last game of the year. Ended up beating the Lions. We went to the playoffs.
Plus, Danny Etling's not going to make the roster at New England.
Yeah, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. They wouldn't have drafted him. He wouldn't have made the roster.
Can I see the
Bill Belichick's not going to draft you as a quarterback.
How many of these? This just occurred to me. How many of these are like total Photoshop jobs? They got Etling in a full Patriots uniform.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
That is the biggest, you know what in the world. How many of these other ones are Photoshopped?
It's just
this one of Rohan Davey also playing for the Patriots. What year did Rohan Davey play for the New England Patriots?
I don't know. Maybe that's where he got drafted. I don't know. I don't go back that far, man. That predates me. I was in middle school when that happened. But I just think you've got to give him some credit is all, man. Listen, that's an impressive number. That's the number one number in the SEC, whether you like it or not.
All right, so people are coming into your fence. Cliff Nelson says Matt Flynn sets records in the game for Green Bay, got paid the next year.
That's the one I'm talking about.
William Wright said the same thing.
That's the game I'm talking about. I think it was against the Lions, I'm pretty sure. It was like the last game of the year. It was incredible.
Yeah, and listen, that's there's Cliff Nelson also says how many Georgia quarterbacks in the NFLPA. Hey, Georgia's not the one putting this graphic out there. I mean, listen,
by the way, there's one, and he makes a lot of money.
Yeah, right. That's about it. And now Aaron Murray just got invited to a Bears minicamp, by the way.
Yeah.
But Georgia's like a lot of these SEC teams that have not had great success with the quarterbacks. But Georgia's also not tweeting this stuff out either.
Yeah, no, I understand it. I just think it's impressive nonetheless. 7 quarterbacks drafted in the last 20 years. One of them was first overall.
I agree with old Brandt here, who says, and I'm right, y'all are right. I'm wrong with the Matt Flynn thing. He had a better game than I realized, but it's like one game. Old Brandt says, this is only one step from the Twitter graphic showing all the NFL players coached by Tennessee.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a little bit more in that category.
Well, I mean, listen, Steve Ensminger's got a little more claim to that. I mean, he's been around LSU for a long time, right? I mean, we're talking about a guy who's an LSU lifer in a lot of different
Tyler Mann says, oh, hell, B.A., Aaron Murray doesn't count. That's why I said it in a joking way. Like Georgia's claim.
Well, I'm saying you can't count all those LSU quarterbacks and say Aaron Murray doesn't count. I mean, if we're talking about that.
All right, anyway, let's get ready to wrap things up today. We're always looking to close the show the same way every day, and we're always looking for champions of life, and I don't even know what to even tell y'all about this. This is all over the internet, and so is it what? The Laurel, the Yanni thing?
Laurel, Yanni.
Some people hear Laurel, some people hear Yanni. Y'all probably seen this 9 million places by now. But here is it if you want to know what everybody's talking about. Here is it. Decide for yourself. Is it Laurel or is it Yanni?
Laurel, Laurel, Laurel.
So I hear Laurel like plain as
Laurel.
day, but
Laurel.
Hannah hears Yanni,
Laurel.
right? And Michael, you hear Laurel. Patrick, what do you hear? He hears Laurel. What do you hear?
I've heard them both.
You have?
I've heard them both. I heard Laurel when I got up this morning. I thought, boy, somebody's playing a trick on us.
Mike's
And I walked
ear-
in here, and they were playing it behind the glass, and I thought, oh my God, I can hear Yanni. I can hear, and it's saying it at the same time. It's crazy. It's different frequencies.
What Mike is telling you is he's earbud dexterous.
Supersonic hearing.
You can hear them both. So some people hear Laurel, some people hear Yanni. I hear a bunch of people who need to get back to work.
Yeah, no, I agree too. Listen, and thanks to everybody that stuck around for 90 minutes on today's show. That's awesome.
By the way, this also kind of reminds you of the dress thing from, what is it, a couple years ago now? Like, I see gold and white. That's all I see. But I guess some people see blue and black. Is that right?
Yeah, I see.
You
gold
see
and
blue
white.
and black. So I don't see the blue and black at all.
I see
on
gold
this.
and white, but I'm like half colorblind.
I'm also totally colorblind.
Yeah.
So like, this experience is what I deal with every single day, thinking something's one color and it's not. But as you said, this was one heck of a long show. So if you watch the whole thing today, we certainly appreciate that. Whether you see gold and white or blue and black, or you hear Laurel or Yanni or anything in between, we're just glad you're with us. And we will see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. But in the meantime, listen to the podcast. Are we doing the whole thing for the podcast today? That seems like a lot. Yeah,
you tell us.
We'll just keep it to the regular 60 minutes on the podcast today. But share the show with your friends on Facebook and YouTube and all those places. Let them know we're talking about the SEC here every afternoon. And back again tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of SEC Country Live. Y'all have a great day.